Good morning, everyone. Since everyone is here, then we can start today's meeting. The agenda for today's meetings is to discuss and examine the company's development that have occurred so far. Okay, let's start with import tariffs on Chinese products. Olivia, can you show us what conditions are currently happening?
Okay, let me connect my laptop to the TV screen first. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Theodora Santoso, or you can call me Zhang Jiahua, and my student ID number is 112305052. And today I'll be explaining case number one or question number one, which basically discusses about WTO's free trade agreement, in this case, USA and China's case. So this is the question itself. After China's entry into WTO in 2001, US became the major importer of Chinese products. In the end of 2018, President Trump ordered the imposition of tariffs on Chinese products. Nearly all economists who responded to surveys conducted by Associated Press and Reuters said Trump's tariffs would do more harm than good to the American economy. To start off, before explaining all of the questions, I would explain first what is WTO. WTO itself stands for the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. Taken from WTO's official website, WTO focuses on its agreements negotiated and signed by the bulk of world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. Their goal is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and freely as possible. So, simply put, WTO is an international wide organization which promotes free trade in the international market. So, this is the first question that I got, which is to use a diagram to explain why USA became the importer of Chinese products under WTO's free trade agreement. To start off, I will be showing you guys USA's graph before the free trade agreement. So it's easier to see how the impact of USA's market after the agreement. And this is USA's graph before the free trade. The equilibrium without trade is in P and Q, which happens when the supply curve and the demand curve intersects with each other. And before trade, there's only domestic buyers and sellers in the market. So in this case, the equilibrium price and quantity is determined by only the domestic market. Next up, I will be showing USA's markets graph after WTO's free trade agreement. Since now USA is open to free trade, there will be another supply curve, which is the world's supply curve. The world supply curve is assumed to be a perfectly elastic supply curve because the international market is much larger than the domestic market, where the domestic buyers and sellers won't be able to affect the international price. Hence, that's why the world supply curve is horizontal. And after free trade, USA's market price will shift from P to P2, since the world supply curve is lower than the domestic equilibrium. This would also impact USA's market as at point Q2 to the other Q2, imports would flood into USA's market. This includes imports from China. Also, now the market would have both domestic and international supply, where the domestic supply starts from zero to the point where the domestic supply curve and the world supply curve intersects, and the international supply curves would continue to graph. The next question is to use another diagram to show how President Trump's tariff policy would affect USA's import on Chinese products. When a country applies tariff to their imports, it means that there would be another supply curve, which is the world supply curve plus tariff. When there are tariffs being implemented on imports, the number of imports going in the country, or in this case, going into USA, would be less. This is because the cost for imports to go in USA would be higher. This can be seen by the change in quantity supplied, which changed from Q2 become Q3. Another thing to illustrate the change is this area. The number of imports going in the USA can be seen from the green area, while the pink area shows the number of imports decrease since there's tariff imposed. So the domestic supply when the tariff is imposed is going to be a bit higher as well, which is where the domestic supply curve intersects with the world supply plus tariff curve. For the third question, I will be explaining whether I agree with those economists or not, as well as explaining my arguments. To simply put, I do agree with the economists, which to recall, they said that Trump's tariff would do more harm than good to USA's economy. In the bright side, by imposing tariffs to the imports, the government could receive tax revenue, which could be used for the country's needs as well as to increase the economy itself. Other than that, the domestic producers would increase more than when there is no tariff. And in addition, by opening up to import itself, the consumer surplus would increase than when it was only open to domestic markets. However, as this discusses about the implementation of tariffs on the imports itself, we could see that the consumer surplus will decrease. I will explain this later on the graph. This could actually create more harm as the consumers are as well as the citizens in the country, which means that the consumer surplus or loss would have a larger effect on the economy. This could mean that the decrease of consumer surplus may lead to many other losses, such as an increase in unemployment, the decrease of living standards, and more. For example, when the imports increase in cost due to tariffs, it harms their production as their costs would increase. Many workers that are employed in factories that use imported goods in their production processes could be laid off and lose their jobs as the factories may want to reduce their costs. This could lead into an increase in the unemployment in USA. And secondly, based on Brookings.edu, American trading partners often implement a tariff called the retaliatory tariff, which can actually limit USA's export production, which could also harm the workers in the industries. So even if the government and domestic producers are benefited, the overall number of citizens and workers in the industry of imports and exports that could be gaining a loss are much larger. This could make the country's living standard go down and cause or trigger many other losses for the citizens as a whole. And last but not least, there are also dead weight loss in the graph. And for the last question, I will be showing a graph to support my arguments from before. Here are the areas and alphabets to make my explanations easier. When there's only free trade without tariff, the consumer surplus would be in area A plus B plus C plus D plus E and plus F, and the producer surplus would only be G. So the total surplus would be the area A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And after the tariff on imports is implemented, the producer surplus will increase by C, which makes it C plus G, while the consumer surplus will decrease by C, D, E, and F, and becomes only A and B, which is the blue area. Whereas the area E, or the green area, would become the tax revenue for the governments, and area D and F would become the deadweight loss. The area when the consumer surplus decreases is much more than the increase in producer surplus and tax revenue for the government. This is because there is a deadweight loss in the graph, making the total surplus area only A, B, C, E, and G, while before the tariff, it was A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So, to support and conclude my arguments before, we could clearly see that in the graph above that there are actually areas that go through deadweight loss, as well as seeing the total surplus decrease. And even though there are tax revenues that could benefit the government, but the tax revenues added with the new consumer surplus, as well as the producer surplus, wouldn't add up to the total surplus when wasn't any tariff imposed. And that is all from me. And to sum up and conclude all my explanation and analysis before, yes, I do agree that Trump's tariffs on import would do more harm than good to the American economy. And thank you all for listening. I hope this could be beneficial for you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Olivia, for the explanation. Alright, how about Mel? What is your process in researching Pigovian tax? Is there anything wrong with it?
Luckily, there's no problem. Since from January 2024, the government would be imposing the Pigovian tax, our firm should be aware. I did a research on the tax, and my presentation would be including a lot of graphs, so it's for like better understandings.
Now, let's see what I've researched on Epigovian tax. As far as we know, Epigovian tax is a government cost on any activity that creates socially harmful externalities. But what are those socially harmful externalities? Socially harmful or negative externalities is one type of market failure that arises when the action causes the negative effect on the third party, which is not involved in the situation. These are the examples: air and water pollution from factories, noise pollution from the construction zone, secondhand smoking, farm production, and traffic congestion. How Pigovian tax shifts the cost from society to the producer. Let's first take a look into this diagram. You see the price cost curve, which is the direct cost to the seller, as a supply curve. Another one above is called social cost curve. This curve came from the summation of the private cost and the external cost. The external cost is the value of the negative impact on the bystanders. So the gap between these two curves is the external cost. The quantity and the price at point A is the market equilibrium, but it's not efficient. Next, the government will impose a tax as same as the size of the external cost. The tax will shift the supply curve or the private cost curve inward, which will be at the social cost curve. Then the social cost will become the private cost plus the tax. And why can Pigovian tax discourage behavior that create negative externalities? I can use this graph to explain. After tax implementations, the socially optimum point would be at point B. You see that the optimum price, which would also be the price for consumers, is higher. Also, the producer will receive less, since that the quantity demand decreases to optimum quantity. In the other words, the pollution decreases. Pigovian tax can also create more efficiency in economic because the tax will reduce pollution at the lower cost to society. Also, you can see that in the graph, the yellow area is the tax revenue. The tax revenue is the revenue for the government. They can use this to manage with damage of the externalities.
Thank you so much for your research information. We will be more aware of our firm's factor creating negative externalities. Alright, next thing I want to introduce our new corporate financial consultant, Rebecca. Rebecca, as our new company financial consultant, do you have any opinions regarding the current condition of our company?
Good morning, boss and coworkers. Thank you for having me today. So today I'm going to show you and present to you the firm's condition and its profit. I will also give a graphical analysis. So the first one, we need to complete our data. So I will show you the table calculation. The first one, we're going to find total cost, and to find total cost is by multiplying average total cost with the quantity. So it's 2.2 times 2,000 and we get 4,400. Now we have to find the average variable cost. To get average variable cost, we can just divide total variable cost with the quantity. So we get 1.8 for our average variable cost. The third one is we're going to find total fixed costs. To get total fixed costs is by total cost minus total variable costs. So we're going to get 800 for our total fixed cost. The fourth one is average fixed cost. To get average fixed cost, we can get it from
average total cost minus average variable cost. So it's 2.2 minus 1.8, and we get 0.4 for our average fixed cost. The last one, or the fifth one, is price. We can find the price in several ways, but to make it simple, we can just find the price by dividing our total revenue with the quantity. So it's 4,000 divided by 2,000, and we got 2 for the price.
And here's the final number that we have. So the first one, we have our quantity, and it's 2,000, and we have 4,000 for total revenue, 4,400 for total cost, 3,600 for total variable cost, 2.2 for our average total cost, 1.8 for our average variable cost, 800 for our total fixed cost, 0.4 for our average fixed cost, and 2 for our price. Now, from this data given, I can conclude that our firm is not maximizing its profit, rather it's producing loss. Why? Because here we know that price is bigger than the marginal cost, and the marginal cost is equals to average variable cost because we are a perfectly competitive firm. And I know this is not a good condition, so I would suggest that in the short run, the firm needs to raise the production. And here I will give the graphical analysis so you can get a better understanding. So currently we are in this point where our Q is 2,000. And in this point, we know that our marginal revenue is bigger than the marginal cost. But because we want to maximize our profit, or at least we want to reduce our losses. So we need to raise the quantity until this point. Because at this point, and when we reach this point, our price will be equals to marginal cost. And that's all from our presentation. I hope you can understand it well. Thank you very much.
Good suggestion. I will follow up on this with the company manager. Thank you. Jessica, how about our Barrick Gold? How is it developing?
Currently, Barrick Gold has two mines, namely the Bulyanhulu mine in Tanzania and the Kalgoorlie mine in Australia. The following table reports information on selling price and cost for the two mines. Barrick Gold selling price is different from the spot price because part of its production is sold through long-term contracts and also because of the company use of hedging. First, to illustrate the shift in Bulyanhulu marginal cost curve, selling price and profit maximizing scale of production between 2002 and 2004, we can just see the production and the selling price because in this case, the marginal cost is equal to the selling price. So we can see the production and the selling price over the years in 2002, 2003, and 2004, and then we can make the curve. We can see the selling price of gold increase from $339 to $391 per ounce. This increase in the selling price means that Bulyanhulu was able to sell its gold at a higher price, potentially increasing its revenue and profit margins. For this case, the marginal cost is equal to the selling price, so the Bulyanhulu marginal cost curve will shift upward. And this shift in the marginal cost curve indicates that the mine's production cost is also increased, so likely due to factors such as a higher electricity price, wages, and other inputs. And for the profit maximizing scale of production, will be where the marginal cost is equal to $391 per ounce in 2004. So in 2003, Barrick continued to produce from the Bulyanhulu mine even though the selling price of gold was less than the average production cost. Was this a mistake? And it's not a mistake because it makes sense to continue production as the selling price exceeds the average variable cost, which the selling price is $366 per ounce and the average variable cost is $246 per ounce. The average cash cost here is represents the average variable cost. There's also several reasons like hedging and long-term contracts. For the hedging, Barrick may have use hedging strategies to mitigate the impact of lower gold price, allowing them to continue production even during periods of lower selling price. Hedging involves locking in future selling price to protect against price fluctuations. For long-term contracts, Barrick may have had long-term contracts in place that required them to fulfill their production obligation regardless of short-term price fluctuation. This contract could have provided some level of price stability and guaranteed sales volume. So it's important to note that decisions regarding production level are complex and depend on various factors beyond the selling price and the average production cost. Factors such as market condition, like future price expectation and strategy consideration can all influence the decision-making process. Based on Barrick 2004 data, in the short run, a mine can be considered to be operating at a break-even point if its selling price is equal or greater than its average cash cost. This means that the mine is able to cover its variable costs and operate without incurring any losses. For Brilliant Hulu in 2004, the selling price is $391 per ounce and the average cash cost is $284 per ounce. Since the selling price is greater than the average cash cost, Brilliant Hulu is operating at a short-run break-even condition in 2004. And for Kalguru in 2004, the selling price is $391 per ounce and the average cash cost is $234 per ounce. Similarly, the selling price is greater than the average cash cost, indicating that Kalguru is also operating at a short-run break-even condition in 2004. And for the long run, a mine needs to cover both its variable costs and its fixed costs to operate at a break-even point. These include factors such as amortization, which is included in the average cost. For Brilliant Hulu in 2004, the average cost is $384 per ounce. Since the selling price is $391, is greater than the average cost, then Brilliant Hulu is also operating at a long-run break-even condition in 2004. And for Kalguru, it's the same because the selling price is $391 and then the average cost is $278. So the selling price is greater than the average cost, indicating that Kalguru is also operating at a long-run break-even condition in 2004. Therefore, based on a Barrick 2004 data, both the Brilliant Hulu and Kalguru mine are operating at break-even condition in both the short run and the long run. This means that they are able to cover their variable costs as well as their fixed costs and operate without incurring any losses.
Okay, great job all. Now let's move on. We know that above arrival Taipower has been a monopoly in selling electricity to Taiwanese consumers for 70 years. But now Taiwan recently passed an amendment to its Electricity Act, effectively ending Taipower's 70 years of sector monopoly. Now, but anyone can tell me what is natural monopoly?
Okay, so first I will start sharing my assigned research for this, and I will explain what natural monopoly is, the cost graph for natural monopoly, as well as explaining how Taipower is natural monopoly. Okay, so to start off, I will be explaining what natural monopoly is. So natural monopoly is a type of monopoly in an industry or a market which arises when a firm could supply or produce a good or service to the entire market at a lower cost than the other firms in the market. So this could also be called as having a powerful economic of scale. Other than that, the market might have a very, very high barrier to entry, which prevents rivals or other firms to enter and compete in the market. A national monopoly means that there is only one seller in the market or in a certain geographic location. This also differs from monopoly itself because, as mentioned in its name, it's created naturally, and it's created under certain circumstances where the firm is not required to compete with other firms or get rid of the rivals in the market, such as by having a high startup cost. Next up, I will be explaining the cost graph for a natural monopoly. To start up, I will be explaining the average total cost curve. The average total cost curve is shaped like this because in national monopoly, it is assumed that the fixed cost that the firm needs to pay at the first is very, very big. And that's why, as you can see here, it started a bit high. And as the quantity increased, the average total cost or the fixed cost itself would spread more and more, making it less and less. The variable cost for a national monopoly is also assumed that the cost would cost the firm very, very small. And this is why the average total cost is shaped more and more like a horizontal line, but keep on decreasing. And as for the marginal cost, it is a horizontal line because in national monopoly, it is assumed that the marginal cost is very, very small and hence makes a horizontal line. And this also works for the average variable cost. So next off, the last part from my assigned research, I will be explaining why electric companies such as Thai Power is considered as national monopoly. So Thai Power itself is considered as national monopoly because of some reasons, including the first one, the cost itself. Like I explained before in the cost graph for national monopoly, after Thai Power paid a large amount of fixed costs, any additional unit of electricity produced would cost very little for the firm. Hence, the more units of electricity supplied or sold, the fixed cost can be spread more and more for the firm, making the price and the cost decrease and making the price lower for the consumer also. Simply said, when the number of production increases, the average total cost will decrease, and this could also be called as the economies of scale. So as Thai Power has already created an enormous amount of economies of scale, they are able to supply the electricity to the entire market with a very minimized and very, very low cost. And the second reason is the high startup cost, which in Thai Power's case, it is the infrastructure cost. The infrastructure cost to enter the market in the electricity industry is very, very high, hence making it harder for new competitors or companies or even rivals of Thai Power to enter the market and compete, which leads to no competitor for Thai Power.
First, we have to regulate national monopolies. To allocate efficiency, the efficient output would be where the point of the price is equal to the marginal cost. You'll also find that the average revenue or the demand curve is lower than the average cost. Therefore, from point A to point B, there will be a really big loss area. And what do we do with that? If no one's doing anything, it would be unfair for the natural monopoly firms. In this case, it's the government's responsibilities. The government or the regulators would have to subsidize the loss area here.
Today, I'm going to present on what has happened to our market because now other suppliers of traditional energy are allowed to sell electricity directly to our Taiwanese consumers. This has made our market change. From at first, it is natural monopoly, but now it is a perfectly competitive market. As the market changes, our graph here will also change, as you can see here. And now we have to find where is the equilibrium point. And the equilibrium point is where you can see here the demand curve is actually still the same. And the equilibrium is where the market demand curve intersects with its supply curve.
In a monopoly market, the price of electricity is typically higher and the quantity supplied is lower compared to the perfectly competitive market. This happens because a monopolistic company has the power to set price and limit output to maximize its own profits. However, as the market electricity changes from the monopoly to the perfectly competitive, several changes can be expected. In a monopoly market, the demand curve here represent the market demand for the electricity, and the monopolistic company set the price and quantity at the point where the marginal cost intersects the demand curve, right here. It's the marginal cost and it's a demand curve. Okay, in the perfectly competitive market, multiple suppliers will enter the market, leading to increased competition. This will result in a horizontal market supply curve, which represents the sum of the individual firm supply curve. Okay. As more suppliers enter the market supply curve will shift to the right, increasing the quantity supplied. This is the supply one, and then this is the supply. It shifts to the right. This change will result in a new equilibrium where the new equilibrium show a lower price and a higher quantity compared to the monopoly market. With the entry of new suppliers, consumers in Taiwan will have more options and increase competition for their electricity needs. Overall, the transition from monopoly to the perfectly competitive market is expected to result in a lower price and a higher quantity. This change will benefit consumers by providing them with more choice, lower price, and a more competitive and reliable electricity market.
Okay then. Well, let's end our meeting here. You guys did a great job. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to work again with all of you.
Okay, good. Let's go.